Tonight in Berlin, the boundary between the two Germanys is becoming even more blurred.
One West Berliner sprayed champagne back. Then, just before 10 o'clock, the moment Berliners have waited 28 years for.
The opening of the wall and the sheer elation that went with it, that couldn't, of course, last forever.
It was a much more complex and complicated scene than it's been. It wasn't just one whoop and off we go.
The process of unification became unstoppable, but for many, I think it was too quick, and many got left behind. And many of the good things people in East Germany would have wanted to retain in their lives, education, childcare, all these things, were sort of eaten up in this process.
There were cheers of joy. It was wonderful for people to be able to go backwards and forwards, but it wasn't just simple. It wasn't that they just all wanted to immediately become West German Germans with all the values of West Germany.
The West Germans, who had been living in this very prosperous post-war West Germany, you know, with lots of Marshall Plan aid and a thriving economy, they had a pretty good deal. They were fairly cozy, socially, economically, and they didn't want to make any sacrifices. And the East Germans were very proud of what they had achieved within their system. They wanted to pass this on and offer it to the West, and so there was a jealousy between the two. Each one wanted to show off what they had achieved and not let go necessarily of their achievements in the way that was required of them.
We had a different way of life, and we had developed differently. For many years we sent parcels and sent things to our relatives and friends, and not only myself but also others, and they all experienced the same thing. They got no thank you after the wall came down. It was a disappointment to the West people too.
I think I adjusted pretty well, although in my personality I still have problems, and I notice very much what I might be lacking compared to people who grew up in the West.
German analysts would say that there is still a divided consciousness in Germany, and that the wall is still there in people's minds, and the sense that it is two countries and it hasn't really come together again. And I don't think many people travel for pleasure or for leisure between the two halves.
We used to live in Stuttgart, and when I came back to Berlin, looked for a new apartment, I stopped looking for apartments in the West just to narrow my search down, as I told myself, but also because I felt more at home in the East. I thought, of course I know Charlottenburg is good, and Kreuzberg and Schöneberg, nice areas, where I think, I tend to stay more in the East, and I think it's still true. It's still true that people sort of feel more at home.
Berlin as a united city has experienced one of the most wonderful transformation over the past 10 years in particular, in my view.
I like how the cultures in Berlin cross each other, and how people meet and exchange ideas.
It's a city where you can try out some things. It's very open for experiments.
Well, it's exciting, you know, it's Bohemia.
I wouldn't have forecasted and expected it to become as easygoing, as lively, and at least in many respects as sympathetic, as worldly as it really has become.
Because I'm a teacher at the university, I used to notice with my students, and the first students from the West were so conspicuous, you always knew. So much more self-assured and sure of themselves when they walked into a classroom and talked to me. and the people from the East, and this I still notice a bit, they are more socially minded. So if it's group work, it's much easier for people from the East to just do it, get together and just do it and don't complain and don't. Students from the West quite often, if they really make a fuss and want some extra sort of care or something, they are always from the West. I've never ever met a student from the East who wouldn't sort of accept my authority or something. This is really the first generation for, I think, since 2 years now. For 2 years now, I think this has changed, and I can't tell anymore. And I make mistakes. So I think people are from the West when they are actually from the East, and the other way around.